Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Photo Rec TV critique. And we're going to take a look at a few photos submitted to us from my support group. You can be a member of the support group and get weekly critiques as well as access to Patreon-only content. Find out more at photorec.tv/support. It is an awesome group of people, and I love them. Let's dive right into our first image. This is going to be shorter than last critique. Just go on too long, and I want more people to watch these. Shorter's better. Our attention span these days are short. All right, first up we've got Arizona Specialty Photography Watermark. I read an interesting article the other day about photographers not needing a logo. I agree with that. I certainly think that there is a lot of fun as you are starting out a business and kind of picking and determining a logo. But really, keep it simple and just go with your name, I think, for most of us, unless you have a really common name. Now, we can get into a very long discussion about watermarks and whether they're useful or not. I generally tend to lean towards not and find them more distracting than anything else. But this is not a critique of choosing watermarks or not. This is a critique of this image. So there's a lot of really cool textures in this image, and oftentimes when I'm working with photographers, new photographers especially, really try to help them say, well, what is the subject here? And make sure you're filling the frame with it. And you've done a nice job of that. The subject here is this cart, the wood, the old metal, and the kind of contrast of those different materials all right here, right in our face. But I tell you what, I actually would recommend in this case pulling out a little bit. I'd love to see a little bit more about the environment that this cart is sitting in. I can tell it's at the edge of some field somewhere. I'd like to see a little bit more of the farmland in the background. We get just a tiny hint of it back here. And I'd like to see just a tiny bit more of that hint. Or not maybe a tiny bit more, but a little bit more. Another direction to go with a shot like this is really get in tight, and you might have done some of this already, and a shot of straight on this wheel and this wood here, or this wood and this metal here with the green kind of lichen and mossy stuff on it. That looks like it might be stone, or maybe it's just tin too as well. But so there's some really cool textures. So I would, go in either of those directions. Now, the one thing that strikes me about this image is it has a very cool kind of muted tone to it, and I think that's nice, but I would like to see this foreground here. It almost feels artificial, almost feels like this was, hey, is there a chipmunk poking its head up there looking at you? His eye looks a little creepy. It almost feels to me like, that's funny, I've been looking at this image for a while before I started this recording, and I just noticed that little guy right now. It almost looks to me like this was lit with a little pop of flash. And it just has this, as I said, muted and kind of more cooler tone to it than I would personally go with. So I'm going to come up here. This is a JPEG, so we're limited. And I'm going to warm it up a little bit. But I don't really like what happens to the sky when I do that. The sky starts to turn brownish, and that's very rare the sky is that color. So I'm going to back that off a little bit and get my favorite tool. I've talked about it before. It's the gradient tool. And right now it's set on dodge and lighten. But I'm just going to bring this up and now warm it up. And if you need to see what the gradient tool is doing, you can click show selected mask overlay, and it shows you that from below where I applied the gradient to here, it's applied at 100%, whatever effects I do. From here to here is 100 to 50 and 50 to 0. I love the gradient tool, both the linear and the radial, because it just fades out so nicely. And and it can just really kind of hide that editing. So you can see there's a little bit of that warmer clouds down there, but not too much. We can bring this around over here like this. And I don't know if we need to actually bring the exposure up. That was left over. Let's bring it down a little bit, and let's bring that warmth up even a little bit more. I don't know if I love that. Let's try this here. So that looks a little good. Now, a little bit better, I should say, to be correct. Now, if you notice, one place where this gradient fading out is very noticeable is on the branches of the tree. So you can, of course, come in here. I'm not going to do all of this. It would be a little time consuming. But We don't want the flow at 100. We want to back that flow off a little bit. But you can come up here and you can paint just a little bit of this gradient onto these branches to give them just a little bit more warmth. And again, if we click Show Selected Mask Overlay, you can see now that those are getting painted up onto those sections there. And you can leave that on if you wanted to kind of paint. Now notice that I have Auto Mask turned on. If you've watched my videos before, you'll notice that there is a good bit of repetition here. But this is how I edit it. Very similar in many pictures. But because Auto Mask is turned on, it is staying on the branch, even though you can see that there's a little bit of the brush to the right and to the left of the branch, but it's not going outside. It's smart enough because of that Auto Mask. So make sure you have that turned on. That'll save you a lot of time. There's more to do there, but you get the idea. And I think that improves this image a good bit. The other reason why I think maybe you used artificial light is that little bit of reflection in that chipmunk's eye. It might have had a little pop of light that's catching it now, and you might actually want to try to take that out. All right. Overall, I think this is a cool image, and I think it's a cool spot to return to for some future shots. Switching from some farm field somewhere to the Duomo, and this is from Morgan. It's a fantastic shot. I love the crispness. I love that this was not shot late at night. If I had to guess, I would say maybe an hour and a half after sunset. Let's see what your metadata says about time if you said it correctly. 12:51 p.m. Morgan, I don't think you changed your time in your camera before you traveled abroad. All right, so but because it's got there's color in the sky still, and that's fantastic, and we have some shadows to show us a little bit of the mountains in the background. A couple things that strike me. One is it's leaning just the tiniest bit to the right, just the tiniest bit. So I'm going to come down here to my transform tools. I'm just going to hit auto and see how it works. I'm happy with that. I think that did it for me. Maybe teeing a tiny bit back to the right now. Let's see if I bring it down right around there. And if we can do the backslash key, we can see where it was originally and where it is now. It's a subtle change, but for me, it's pretty significant. All right. I think you've balanced the exposure really nicely in here. We have no hot spots. We have some spots that are certainly a little bit brighter where they've had the spotlights hitting very directly down here and up here. I might bring the highlights down a tiny bit more to allow those not to be quite as bright, but just a little bit. I'm also going to raise the clarity a little bit more. Anytime you're working with man-made stuff, I find that I can bring that clarity up a good bit. Really brings out the textures without over sharpening. Really allows you to see the edges and the lines. Does a nice job in that, and I think just that looks good there. I don't have a whole lot more to say, except maybe if I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this, I would come in with a brush in the shadows. So I'm going to raise the shadows, and I'm just going to kind of brush in here and bring these hills out just a little bit more. Again, Auto Mask is on, but also along with Auto Mask, I'm only raising the shadows. So when I come onto here, it's not going to change the temperature, it's not going to change the brightness of this because this isn't a shadowy area. So it's smart enough to say we're really just trying to raise the shadows in here and bring that information out a little bit more. I've got a little bit of halo above the mountaintops now. That's stronger than I would like. So I'm just going to try to fade that out a little bit. But I might have overdone it there. So let's just back it off a little bit. Somewhere around there looks good. Very subtle. Let's go back to our before and our after. Honestly, I'll say it looks more like the halo is standing out than I actually raised the shadows in that area. So I'm not too happy with that. Let's try to bring it down a little bit, because you can move as well. Not what I wanted to do. There, I've moved it down a little bit. Let's see if we have a little less halo now and just a little bit more mountains back there. Very subtle. Not sure it was worth it. Otherwise, fantastic image. Really like the framing. Could have given this guy a little bit more room to breathe over here. And that light right there, Might want to work on getting that cloned out, but otherwise, really nicely done, Morgan. Andy's got a shot of St. Paul's from the Millennial Bridge. Andy, I'm pretty sure you came along on our photo walk, and we shot here, although it was nighttime. I like the decision to go with a slightly longer shutter speed here to kind of give these people a little bit of motion and just kind of change. And so nicely, because of the way this bridge is designed, people come up on the left or right, you really have this just gap between people leading right up to the St. Paul's. And it's fantastic, really nicely done there. The only thing, if I remember correctly, this bridge is not, it's a little shaky. And at 1 second here, they don't look quite as sharp as they could over in this area. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to paint on a little bit of clarity in this area and see if I can get them to look just a little bit sharper. It almost looks like there's a little bit of extra chromatic aberration around there as well. Let's zoom in. So that's as far as we can get to go to 1:1. So we can't really see, but it just, you see that there's just on the edges here. It could be a copper, actually that's a copper gutter right there. I know that's a copper roof, but right there is a copper gutter. So maybe it's not quite as bad as I thought, but up here too, you see that? So we can come down. Oh, we can close this. And we can remove chromatic aberrations. And that makes me happier. Let's turn it back. Well, here, I'll show you just off. Notice that green tint right around those guys up there? And on. Notice that it's mostly gone. That right there, I like that. That looks nicer. Now, the clouds are a little bit warmer than I love, so I'm going to cool it down a little bit more. Somewhere right around there. And looking at the histogram, we've got more room over in the whites. So I'm just going to raise my exposure a little bit. And then come down to my whites and bring them over as well. So you're trying to get kind of a full range. You're trying to stretch that histogram from the left to the right in many images to try to give yourself the full range from black to white of a full tonal value. It looks a little warm to me, or not, a little reddish. So I'm going to bring this down a tiny bit. Not quite that much. Another thing I might do, I already painted on here on clarity, but I might lower my saturation a little bit to kind of take some of the color out of that area. And I painted over here as well, didn't I? So again, I want those to be a little bit more cool and not so colorful in tone. They feel like they're picking up some unnatural color. Other than that though, very nice. All right, I hope those tips were helpful. Let's move on to our next one. Joe's got a beautiful golf course scene here. Whoopsie. Joe's got a beautiful golf course scene here. Lovely little leaning road, or golf path we should say, up and around, takes our eye out over here. Then we can kind of come back and find it again up here. Really like this. I think you've done a nice job. Let's close this. We're looking at a D&G. You've brought in some editing already. Surprisingly, I haven't gone to my crutch yet, but I think this is an image where I'm going to, and that's my crop of 16:9. I love the 16:9 crop. We got a little bit of extra. You see this down here? I don't love all of that. So the 16:9 kind of takes some of that away. I'm going to find a spot right actually back here again. What I'm watching for is, I didn't want to hit that tree. I wanted to give it some breathing room. I like how you framed that already. And now I'm watching down here. I don't want to get the bottom of the signpost, but I don't want to get the top of that other fence post. So right in that area it looks good. And then I'm just going to scan around the frame. What else am I cutting off? Not giving breathing room to. Cutting off some of the shadow here, but that's enough that it's okay. If we were just nicking a top of it, that would bother me. Like right here. See, we're so close to that, but we can't really go any further. Maybe right there. Let's see what we got. And that's the same thing I'm doing when I'm composing. I'm just kind of looking around. What am I cutting off? Am I making sure that I'm deliberate in my framing. So we've got a tiny bit of room down here. That's fine. That's fine. And I think we've got a really nice overall composition. It looks lovely. I love the green. We can come in here to our color. We can say all if we wanted to see all of them. I see you can, you've bumped up the saturation of the aqua color already. Let's play with the green a little bit. Let's shift it a little to the right, and let's increase its saturation like that. Now this does feel quite blue to me. What happens if we bring this back down? I don't see a whole lot of shift in the aqua tones here, so I'm not sure what you're going for in moving that. And let's bring our blues down here as well, so we lose some of that in the sky, but I think that is overall quite nice. One thing we could do up in the sky if we wanted to, radial gradient. So because there's kind of this bow to it, I think this is going to be a faster and an easier edit than using the linear gradient. So we can just bring this down and see how it kind of matches the curve of, I'll call it the horizon. And we can, of course, bring our clarity down. We can make this bluer up there. We need to invert our mask so it's applied to the right area. Let's make sure it's going to the right area. Yep. And let's get some dehaze in there too to fix kind of the edges of those trees. Not that much, way too much. Let's bring it down a little bit more. And another way to control this is the amount of feather. So we could lower that, and you can see you'll get a very hard edge to the radial gradient, which actually is still quite hidden in here because it's, you can see it here, the difference between the top and the bottom, and here and here. But you can play with that to get a much smoother or less smooth transition. There we go. Nice job, Joe. I think this looks great, and it's a beautiful scene. Another castle. Well, actually, on this critique, this is our first castle, technically. First thing that strikes me about this castle is that it looks like it's leaning away. So I'm going to come down to my lens correction, and let's see what happens if we hit auto. Nope. Let's do off. Let's do full. Nope. Sometimes it does a horrible job. So I'm going to come into the vertical transform and manually just drop this a little bit. Let's see where we end up. That looks pretty good to me there, and let's going to get my crop tool and I'm going to click constrain crop down here. That will keep it, making sure it doesn't crop in. There we go. Cropped in that little bit there as well. I think that looks a lot better. Let's hit done for a second. Let's hit before and after. I think that looks a lot better. This is a really nice image. So after I fixed the leaning away, I really like this image. This tree offers a nice frame and a nice, again, kind of composition or component texture difference. What am I trying to say here? I love the bark versus the brick or the stonework. I think that's really neat. And we've got the leaves, kind of the soft leaves, because you went for a slightly longer exposure, 1/6 of a second, must have been a little bit of wind, and they're soft. Now, I would like to see a little bit more uniformity in their blowing and the softness. So how could you do that? Well, you could try taking a couple of different shots over a period of time when the wind was blowing a little bit harder, a little bit softer, and then go through each of those. And maybe you did, and maybe this was the best one, but see if one offered a little bit more uniformity to the softness up here. Otherwise, I mean, you have such gorgeous color in the sky. This time of day that you shot at is just lovely. We've got enough light that it creates some definition. We have none of this is faded off and kind of lost. We still have nice hard edges. I'm not going to say we have shadows, but we have enough that it really gives detail to this. And the lights have just come on. The lights with indoor and outdoor are balanced. We can go up and take a look. You've done some editing here. You've brought your shadows way up and your whites and your highlights down a bit, but still, that isn't a ton of editing. Really, a lot of this work was done by the fact that you went out here at this time of day and took a picture. There is just a little bit of a dead branch over here that I might try taking out, and a person over here. And they're not super noticeable, but they are noticeable enough that I would spend a half a second, especially since in the position that they are, I think it's going to be very easy to just kind of remove them from existence. And I just let it do that real quick without adjusting it at all. And you can see that, if you're paying close attention, you might say, well, why does the hedge go up into that bush like that? But really, you'd have to be looking pretty carefully to see that. And overall, very lovely image. It's kind of a shame you couldn't get them to turn on the lights here and here to be kind of balanced with those there. But it's really interesting. It almost looks like these people are working on computers, or I think that's what they're doing. Wonder why there are people working on computers inside an ancient old castle. The mysteries of Scotland, I'm going to say. All right, so this was a little bit longer than I always wanted, but I hope helpful look at some Lightroom tips and tricks through photo critiques. If you would like to get your photo critiqued, you can find out more at photorec.tv/support. And if you want to learn a lot more about Lightroom, you can find out more about my Lightroom series, which for the month of November is severely discounted, just $18.74. Gets you over 6 hours of Lightroom training videos, keyboard shortcuts, handy written guide. It is an incredible deal and will really help take your post-processing to the next level. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.